In this video, we're going to be looking at multiplication. Now, I'm going to be concentrating on the Chinese grid method. There are lots of different ways to do multiplication, but this is my favourite, and I think this is the easiest one for most. Here we go. Right, 15 times by 17. Now, the way we set out a Chinese grid is like this. So I've got my first number, I'm going to make that my horizontal number. I've got 15 times by, and then my second number is going to be my vertical number. So I need to come underneath the times sign and put 17. That's how I start off pretty much every single Chinese grid. Now then I'm going to draw out a box that will cover all of the numbers. Okay, so that covers those two numbers and it also covers these two numbers. Because I've got two numbers at the top, I need a vertical line that will split them. And because I've got two numbers on the side, I need a vertical line, or horizontal line should I say, that will split them. Now, this is the bit that people don't like. In each box, I need a diagonal line. I need top right to bottom left in every single box. Top right to bottom left, top right to bottom left, and top right to bottom left. And what I'm also going to do is going to just extend those out a little bit. Just continue those lines just slightly outside the grid. And you'll see why I do that in a short while. Right, this is how I multiply with a Chinese grid. I'm going to do 5 times by 1. 5 times by 1 is 5. So I'm going to put 0, 5. And what that means is the top left-hand corner is where I put my tens, and the bottom right-hand corner is where I put my units. So 0 tens and 5 units. So 5 times by 7, though, is 35. So I'm going to put 3 tens and 5 units for 35. 1 times by 1 is 1. So I'm going to 0 tens and 1. And 1 times by 7 is 0, 7. Okay, so I've filled in the grid. All I need to do now is figure out my diagonal lines. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add up my diagonal lines. Starting at the bottom right hand corner, I'm going to add up the numbers in the first diagonal. Well, that's convenient because there's only one number in there. So what I'm going to do is add up that number, which is 5. In my second diagonal, I've actually got 3 numbers. I've got 5, a 3, and a 7. If I add those numbers together, I get a total of 15. Now, unfortunately, I can't put double-digit numbers down here, so I'm going to put the unit down. So out of 15, that's be 5. I'm going to put the 10 into the next group, so I can add it to the next diagonal. Right, third diagonal. In this one, I've got a 0, a 1, and a 0. If I add them together, that's 1. But don't forget the one that I already put over here to add to it, so I've now got 2. Now, I read my answer by just reading left to right now along this line. So 2, 5, and 5 will make my answer 255. Let's try another one. So I've got 16 multiplied by 24. So my first number is going to be 16 times by 24. Again, I've got my horizontal number and I've got my vertical number in line with the times sign. So draw a grid. Here comes my grid again. Now, the neater these are, the easier it is. So I'd recommend try and draw this as neat as possible. I've got 2 numbers there, so I need a vertical split between those 2, and I've got 2 numbers there, and I need a horizontal split there. Diagonal time. So top right to bottom left, top right to bottom left, top right to bottom left, and top right to bottom left. And what we're going to do is we're going to come quickly, just extend them ever so slightly, just outside the grid. There we go. Right, let's do some multiplying. 6 times by 2 is 12, tens and units. 6 times by 4 is 24. 1 times by 2 is 2, and 1 times by 4 is 4. Right, okay, so let's add up some diagonals. So the first one's always the easiest because it's only ever got one number in there. So inside my first diagonal, I have got the value of 4. So I'm just going to put a 4 down in my answer. My second diagonal is these 3 numbers. So I've got a 2, a 2, and a 4. Add them all up and we actually get the answer of 8. In my third diagonal, I'm going to add those 3 numbers together. 1, a 2, and a 0. I haven't even got any carried over numbers, so I just need to add those ones up and I get a total of 3. In the last diagonal, there is a 0, so I don't need to do that. So here's my answer. Reading from left to right, 3, 8, 4. My answer is 384. Okay, next question. So this time I've got a 1-digit number and a 2-digit number. Does that make it any trickier? No, it doesn't. I've got a 1 digit, so 8 times by 34. So I need a grid that will just cover all the numbers, so that'll be enough for the top line, and that'll be enough for the vertical line there. I've got only one number there, so I don't need to split it in any way. I've got two numbers here, so I need to split them with a horizontal line. Don't forget the diagonals, top right to bottom left, and top right to bottom left. And again, we're going to extend them just slightly out of the grid. Okay, here we go. 8 times by 3 is 24, tens and units. 8 times by 4 is 32, tens and units. Let's do the diagonals. Again, starting at the bottom right hand corner all the time. The first diagonal is easy enough. There's only ever one number in there, that's 2. The next diagonal is going to be two numbers this time. You've got a 4 and a 3. Add them together and you get 7. And the last diagonal in this case has one number in there as well. That is the value of 2. So my answer is, from left to right, 272. Okay. Next question. Right, a 3-digit number and a 1-digit number. So I'm going to write 106 multiplied by 7. Again, horizontal line in line with the multiply and a vertical line in line with the multiply. Put a grid so that it covers the top 3 numbers and a grid that it covers the side number. There we go. The neater, the better. I've got 3 numbers on the top here, so I need a line that's going to split these two. So there's my vertical line that will split those 2 numbers, and I need a vertical line that will split those 2 numbers. I don't need to split anything on here because I've only got the one number. So top right to bottom left, top right to bottom left, top right to bottom left, and extend them just slightly outside the grid. Okay, 6 times by 7 is 42, tens and units. 0 times by 7. Anything times by 0 is 0, so that's going to be 0, 0. 0 tens, 0 units. 1 times by 7 is 0, 7. Okay, let's do the diagonals. So the first diagonal, as always, is the easiest. That's an answer of 2. The next diagonal is 0 and a 4, which is also pretty easy. That's just 4. And in the third diagonal is 0 and a 7. So that's going to be a 7. And again, because there's nothing in that one, I don't really need to work with it. So I'm going to answer 742. Right, 14 times by 8. 2 digits and 1 digit. Hopefully getting the idea of what's going on now. I've got 14 times by 8. So grid to cover them and a grid to cover them. There it is. I've got 2 numbers here, so I need 1 vertical split, and I've only got 1 number here, so I don't need to do any splits. Top right to bottom left, top right to bottom left, and just extend them a little bit. Okay, so 4 times by 8 is 32, and 1 times by 8 is 8. Diagonals, here we go. First diagonal, easy. That's 2. Second diagonal, I've got a 3 and an 8 in there. That's going to give me a total of 11. So if you remember what I did last time, I put the unit down and carried 1 into the next group. Third diagonal, there's actually nothing in there, but I've got 1 that I've already carried over, so I need to make sure I use that as well, so that'll be a total of 1. There is my answer, 112. Okay, 6 multiplied by 256. So first number, 6 multiplied by 256. There's my grid, covers the top number, and my grid will also cover those 3 numbers. So make sure it's a nice, neat rectangle. So no vertical splits needed for 1 number, but you've got 3 numbers on the side, so we need to split those 2 with a horizontal line, and split those 2 with a horizontal line. Diagonals, again, hopefully getting used to this now, and extend them out just a little bit. There we go. Okay, so let's do the multiplying. 6 times by 2 is 12, 6 times by 5 is 30, and 6 times by 6 is 36. Diagonals, here we go. 6, it's easy enough. The next diagonal, I've got a 0 and a 3, which again is pretty easy, that's 3. Next diagonal, I've got, wrong colour, I've got a 2 and a 3, so add them 2 together and I get 5, and the last column, there's actually a 1 in there this time, which is not a problem. That means that total would be 1. Reading round left to right, I've got an answer of 1, 5, 3, 6. And there's my answer. Okay, 13 times by 245. The numbers are getting a little bit bigger now, but hopefully you'll see what's going to happen. I need 13 times by 245. I need a grid that will cover those two, and I need a grid that will cover those three. So a nice, neat, big rectangle. One vertical split between those two. There it is. And I've got three numbers over here, so one split between those two, and one split between those two. Top right to bottom left, top right to bottom left. Make sure you do your diagonals in every single grid. Some people like to do it all the way down. I get lost sometimes, so I just do a diagonal in each grid, and I don't make any mistakes. And then just extend them just outside the grid a little bit. Okay, let's do the multiplying. 3 times by 2 is 6. 3 times by 4 is 12. 3 times by 5 is 15. 1 times by 2 is 2. 1 times by 4 is 4. 1 times by 5 is 5. Okay, diagonals, here we go. The first one is always the easiest one, so that's 5. The next diagonal, I've got a 2, a 1 and a 5. Add those three up and we get a total of 8. The next diagonal, I've got a 6, a 1 and a 4. If I add those up, I get a total of 11. So I'm going to put the unit down and carry the 1 into the next group. The next diagonal is going to be 0, 2 and a 0. So that'll make 2. But don't forget the one I've already put over here, so that'll add to them, so I get 3. And the last diagonal has 0 in there, so I just don't bother writing that one out. So my answer is, from left to right, 3, 1, 8, 5. 3,185. Okay, time for you to have a go at these. Hopefully you've understood what I'm trying to do. Pause the video here. I'm going to put the answers on the board in a short while, and good luck. Okay, here come the answers. Give them a tick, give them a cross. Hopefully you've got them all correct. Like I say, the neater this technique is, the easier it is. Hopefully you've understood what to do. And that's all you need to know, really. Thanks for watching.